Welcome everyone to the second in our series of Philatelic Roundtables presented by the Mid-Atlantic Federation of Postal History Societies. We are a new organization dedicated to postal history education and collaboration. Please check our website at www.mafphs.org for more information. This roundtable, along with our others, will be recorded and made available on the Presentations tab on the website. First, I'd like to introduce Charles DeComo. Charles is a lifelong philatelist, postal historian, and award-winning author. He enjoys researching, restoring, writing, publishing, and presenting on a broad array of philatelic and postal history topics. He is the president of the Philatelic Society of Lancaster County, president of the Empire State Postal History Society, editor-in-chief of the USPCS Chairman's Chatter, a life member of the US Philatelic Classics Society, and on the board of the Pennsylvania Postal History Society. A native New Yorker, he currently resides in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, with his wife Kathleen of 25 years and their two daughters, McKenna and Mia. I'd also like to welcome Jeff Stage of Syracuse, New York. He is the editor for the Excelsior, the journal of the Empire State Postal History Society. He has been a writer and editor for most of his professional career. Jeff has worked for nearly 36 years as a reporter and editor for the daily Syracuse newspapers. In 2015, he joined the staff of the American Philatelic Society as an editorial associate. He worked with two editors at the APS, J. Bigalke and Martin Kent Miller, before leaving in 2018 to return home to Syracuse. He still contributes to the American Philatelist as the new U.S. stamps columnist. In 2013, he self-published a mystery novel, Chasing Jenny, based on the still-unsolved theft in 1955 of the McCoy block of inverted jennies from the National Stamp Show in Norfolk, Virginia. Side note, though 3 of the 4 stamps have been found, the book's plot still holds up. And finally, Martin Miller is the editor of the Pennsylvania Postal History Society Journal and several others. He has had experience working with the APS, the ATA, and the U.S. Stamp Society. Martin has helped to create many digital and print books, events, and websites. He is the founder of the Philatelic Press, which is a communications agency focusing on print, web, and virtual presentation tools for the philatelic community. Thanks again, and we would appreciate it if everyone but the panelists would put their audio on mute and save your questions for a Q&A session at the end. Panelists, thank you for being here. We had a list of potential items to discuss, so let's start off with Charles, and then we will include our other panelists as we go.
Appreciate everybody being here and appreciate the introduction and appreciate the panelists that I am fortunate to be serving with tonight and everybody else. And as I said, really new, I think, to the writing aspect of it, which I know we want to talk again this evening. And I'm kind of leveraging some prior writing. I'm sitting with 2 really excellent authors here that have published some really significant material. And like I said, really new to this space. And then also new to, I think, just being an editor, if you will, of what I like to think as part of the Classic Society is the Chairman's Chatter. And if you are not a member or haven't read it, I am sure more than happy to send you a couple of copies electronically, if you like, of what we do with the Classic Society. And quietly for about 30 years, maybe 25, I was the editorial proofreader for the Chronicle that Charlie Peterson and I quietly just had me do that nobody knew. And when Michael Lawrence came along and took on the Chronicle, he thought I should be in the masthead. And I appreciate that as well. If you want to find a way to learn about this hobby, be an editorial proofreader for any journal of philatelic in nature. And you don't just read to figure out periods, commas, and semicolons and grammar. You're absolutely looking at the content of any journal from cover to cover and learning an amazing amount. And I was very fortunate to be able to do that many, many, many years ago and still do it today, to be able to expand your sphere of what you read and what you look at and those rabbit holes that we go down. So where to start? I mean, maybe the place to start, Steve, and again, I appreciate you putting these topics, and I know we're going to open it up to individuals later, is maybe the best place to start for me, and we could talk about, editing, but I think I'm going to leave that to kind of Jeff and Martin because that's really their bailiwick. Maybe the place for me to start is how I kind of eased in to the writing aspect, and that was one of the first topics, articles, long, short, technical, social, etc. And it started with things that I was interested in. And then I'm going to pass it off to, I think, Martin and Jeff. It's really about, we collect a lot of different things, whether it's that one stamp or that one cover or anything else around that. Because I know we all collect different things, coins and currency and postcards and whatever we collect. And they're usually ancillary to or complement our stamps and postal history. And I like to tell the story. It's just the angle that I come at it from. And I think weave in that stamp or cover or letter into that. And I think maybe what I just recently put out was a good example of that, of the kind of research I like to do in the articles. And I started out with my first article, must have been 5 years ago, was the first time I ever even thought about publishing. And I think it was in the Excelsior, I'm pretty sure it was, of the Empire State, because I collect a little bit of New York State postal history and transatlantic mail and stamp lists. And I just figured, here's an interesting cover and an interesting story, and let me write a short little article. So where do we even start? And that's part of probably what we're talking about tonight. And what I went back to some of my mentors, it's really to start is you're not going to write this whole big story right off the top. What you really just do is start very simply in describing the object that's in front of you. And if you start small by just looking at the object that's in front of you and maybe writing a couple of sentences around that and being descriptive around that stamp or that cover, then you've got sort of the essence and or the basis of where you can go next and where you can begin that research and how you can use references in your own library or online or your colleagues or your peers or a myriad of other approaches to build upon that nugget of a story that you find very interesting of cover X that went from A to B. And you maybe want to understand a little bit more about who wrote it, where it went to, and how it got there. And that's how I really kind of started. And that was really how I kind of dropped on into it. Having been a proofreader for all those years and reading the Chronicle and many other journals, as well as a member of all these societies, I was always getting inundated with reading, the article, the journals that were out there. And I kind of also, that helped. But then I tried to make my writing, my style, you find your own voice, my own. And I think that's also very important when you're writing. And I try to be conversational, but I try to think about the reader on the other end. What do I like to read and what do I like to read about? And so that's, for me, where I think we want to maybe take the discussion and expand it. I didn't start with a 30-page or even a 5-page. I really started with just a couple of pages and then having a good editor on the other side doesn't hurt, and a couple of colleagues that can read it and read it with you or for you. So your friends that are on this meeting now and your associates at your local club are also a pretty good soundboard, I thought, when I started to go, hey, does this story make sense? Do you like it? Does it kind of translate? And do I kind of have the logical thoughts in my mind of where I want to structure it? Because writing is everyone's at different levels, and we may be very new to it, or we may have written in a different space. But I think when it comes to this hobby we love, there's really a way and a place for anybody to start. And it can be a one-pager with a single cover or stamp, and you can write a nice piece and you can tell your story. And then you're a publisher, and then you're an author. And then I think that will feed you to go, what else? I think it was really exciting that first time I saw my name, and it was the Excelsior. I was giddy when that thing came out, and it was a couple pages. And I went, wow, there you go. And I was motivated to kind of think about what was next. So for my opening, I thought I would start there, of how I got into the writing side of it. And sort of maybe then pass it off to Martin, Jeff, who've clearly been doing it a little bit longer. But I took the bit of the seed of my publishing in the R&D world as a geneticist and a oncology, that medical piece. And I took that and I cooked a little bit of that flavor from a diagnostic perspective, how to investigate a cover or stamp and write those points down and then tell the story from there. So that was my journey to get to here as an author or a writer and a publisher. And been fortunate the past couple of years to have really just dove on in and had the ability to do that. And I could talk later on when we get to it about being, I guess, then an editor. And we have other editors on here as well that can speak about that piece. But I really wanted to talk about the author piece because that to me is really exciting about where we need to go, and that anybody can tell a story, share a story. And I'm telling you, there's an audience out there that wants to read it and hear about it. So that was my motivation. I'll stop there, Steve, if that works, and kind of maybe open it to Martin and Jeff if they want to kind of go from there and their thoughts on that side.
Sure, that sounds great. And I really want to emphasize, and I don't mean to speak for the editors, but I know it's been a topic, the one page or the thing you were talking about, how editors can really appreciate those fillers. The little stories mean just as much sometimes as the big ones. So
absolutely,
that sounds good. So Martin's nodding his head. So let's go to Martin next because he appreciates that, I'm sure.
I do. That's a good point. And I want to echo something that Charles said. Write what you know and write what you like. So many times I have dealt with authors who are agonizing over a topic, and ultimately a couple of times I came to the question, okay, do you like this issue? Do you like this aspect of history? Well, it seemed like it was going to be interesting at the beginning, and that's a clue. If you don't love it, if you don't like it, don't write about it for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're going to agonize over it. Number two, then an editor is going to agonize over it. And unfortunately, quite often your audience will agonize over it as well. And really that's where my heart lies, is with the audience. Now, in looking at all of the faces that are on this meeting, a lot of you have written extensively. You have got a lot of experience, a lot of credits to your name. But the one piece of advice on the writing side that I would say is make sure you love what you're writing about, because that will show to the audience regardless of the editor that picks it up. Write it from an honest standpoint. When you find things that may not be so good, it may be a matter of crafting those to not be offensive, to not condemn someone for, what may have been an oversight or an accident or, the result of a bad day. But write with integrity so that when your piece is read, you get the good, the bad, and the ugly, because the goal from all of this is to learn and to enjoy. And if you're not enjoying it, your audience is not going to. Think about the audience from this perspective as well. Each magazine has a different audience. If we were to poll everybody here about interest, about things that you focus on in collecting, you focus on in writing, we would find a huge diversity. And, I know that diversity is a big word in today's culture. There's a lot of political charge to it. But in diversity, one of the ideas is let's get enough content inside a book. And I say book when I'm talking about, a journal, a newsletter, a 300-page tome. The idea is let's get enough content that whoever picks this up, there's a high probability that there's going to be something that interests them. With that in mind, you've got to think about your audience. You've got to think about the publication into which you are submitting. With that, couple of things. Number one, don't ever be offended if an editor says to you, I think this might be better in this other publication. That happens for a number of reasons. Number one, hopefully we know the other publications and where the specialties lie and who their audience is. Because if, my audience is very interested in this aspect and you're miles away from that aspect, I'm not likely to reject your piece. I'm likely to say, here's a better outlet for you, because that audience is going to be more engaged in that particular material. We started down the path just as I picked up the conversation about the length of an article. Let me say two things. Number one, write multiple lengths. Just today, literally, I received an email. The piece was probably maybe 300 words and had about 5 images, 4 of which are fantastic. They are right on target with the narrative, and that piece will fill. I need those every edition of every publication that I work on. Now, here's what not to do. Don't get so involved in your research that you have decided you have to tell the entire story of everything that ever existed for this stamp, its history, the path that it took. Generally speaking, we're not talking about huge publications, at least on the magazine's journal side. And when I've got 80 pages or 48 pages, and it is not a full 8.5 by 11, and someone submits, and this is not made up, a 68-page, single-spaced, plus images article, it's never going to fit. Now, in some cases, I can break that up, but if I run a piece like that, it's probably going to be 13 issues of certain magazines, and that's a problem. So don't be offended if an editor says you might be a better fit for this other publication. Don't be offended if the editor says, you know what, this is more than I can put into my normal stream, but I really like this piece right in the middle. It is so rich. It's not been published before. Can we focus on that? And don't be offended for those publications that are starting to do it if the editor says, hey, can I take this to the website? Because I've heard a lot of people say, well, I'm offended when an editor says I want to put it on the website rather than the magazine. In a lot of cases, some of these web articles are getting a broader readership than what is printed. I know it feels good. I know you open up the package if it comes in an envelope or a poly bag, and the magazine just smells good, and it smells good, and your name's there. But I might be able to give you a readership of 1,800 to 3,500, depending on the publication. And then I might be able to tell you, okay, on this website, 4,800 people read this just last week. So write what you love, write with consideration for the audience and how it's going to be published. And don't be offended when an editor says, here's the way we can make you look best. Because if we're moving you away from where you are, it's because we think we can make you look better in a different way. Now, talk about making people look good. Jeff has proven to me many, many times his capability to take some problematic articles and make some real masterpieces of it. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and get him to give some input too.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that very much. A couple things. Thank you, Steve, for inviting me and everybody. We all appreciate it. Number two, Charlie made several points that I would have made also, and Martin did as well. It must be the reason I've gotten along well with both these gentlemen. We see eye to eye most of the time, 95% of the time or so. So I'll try not to repeat too much of what they said. But I'm sort of going down many of the same roads. Martin brought up the very long article he received. I don't know if he recalls this, but at my ending days at APS, we'd received a very long article from a gentleman who has written for us. He's a good writer and he's a smart guy and he knows his philately. But I think there were about 80 to 100 images and long. But the good thing about that is I know that I talked to him before I left and said, look, there's no way this can all go in the American Philatelist. Would you think about us running one section, maybe two, and the rest online? And he was all in favor of that. I don't know if the article ever ran, but at least he understood where we were coming from, that we couldn't run it all. Going backwards, and I apologize, I bounce around a lot, but it all comes out right. I don't know how. Martin mentioned, we need those short articles all the time. I don't know if anybody can see this. My share is not working, but here from the American Philatelist of a few years ago, a short article, there's a giant image of a cover there, some text. It did jump, but the jump was only to here. It would have, just so it filled a page and a half. And the writer, I'm not even sure he covered every marking that was on this cover that went all around the world and, has some really neat stuff on it. And I think even he at one point said, well, that takes care of the front of the cover. I'll talk about the back of the cover some other time. So we always need those articles. They often have really nice piece of artwork. that can go with the story. One thing to think about with artwork is think about that this is going to be laid out in a magazine style, and maybe that artwork needs to be maybe spread. So think about and have a discussion with the editor. Oh, I think, this piece of artwork would look really nice on the front of the article, and maybe this other real nice piece could go to the end. I had a problem with this past Excelsior. Not a problem, but Mr. DeComo will be.
I knew I was going to be named there, Jeff. Go ahead.
So anyway, this is a really nice article. 2 nice pieces of artwork up there at the top. But then by the time I got to the last page, it did read kind of like a novel, and that's the no artwork. It happens, and we accommodated it, and it worked out fine. But it's just something to think about. You don't want to force your story into putting artwork where it doesn't belong. I understand that, but it's just something you can think about, even if you don't have the artwork. I have added some things to some of the articles for the Excelsior. This is postal history mostly. So I've plucked stamps, images of stamps that go with the story maybe, or an individual. So that's something to keep in mind at some point during your writing. Don't let it drive your story, but it's something that helps. We talked about audience. So again, recently, with the Excelsior, received an article from, obviously a very smart gentleman and a good writer. But as I went through it, its title was about a small post office, I think on Long Island or downstate. But it was, I think I wrote down about 5 pages before we reached that post office in his story. And in the meantime, we met Benjamin Franklin, we went to ancient Egypt, we met Teddy Roosevelt, and a few other, substance, and it just wasn't going to work. So that was a rejection for him. I know he wasn't happy, but it just was not going to serve the readers of the Excelsior, unfortunately. There's so many things we can talk about here. I think it was Martin talking about you don't have to write an article that's the most definitive about that topic, especially if it means doing a whole lot of extra research and jamming material into a story that is already nice with fine details about what you mean to show. I tried to learn something from every editor and writer that I work closely with, and the editor that comes to mind with that told me, as I wrote some feature story about something, and I used an image of somebody smacking a home run in baseball, but baseball had absolutely nothing to do with the story. And, so 2 things came up. Number one, he said, not every story you write has to be the definitive story of that subject. And number 2, keep your apples and oranges separate. So that's another tip, is that if you're writing about baseball, that's fine. But if I'm not writing about baseball, I'm writing about something in science, well, what's the baseball doing there? So there are lots of those kinds of tips that editors and other writers can give you. I know many of you have written many, many stories. As we talked about rejections, don't be afraid of rejection sometimes, or maybe ask to be recraft something or bring something out. Many good writers, most writers other than somebody named Shakespeare, have been rejected at some point. So like that. I'm going to send us back to Steve at the moment, and we'll get into some deeper kinds of things that we can talk about. How about that?
All right, thanks everybody. I appreciate that. One of the things that I noticed you guys talked about a little bit were images. And I know there's people with varying levels of expertise and tools to deal with images. And some editors I've heard keep it simple. Just send them to me. Don't try and, edit them. Don't try and make them look better. Don't change the colors. Don't put borders. Don't do this, even though sometimes people try to do that stuff, right? So can you talk, if you guys can talk maybe a little bit about the keep it simple part as far as images go, maybe some tips on some software that might be might be usable for people that don't have a lot of skill with it, maybe just even a snipping tool or something along those lines, up to, of course, I know Martin is like an Adobe guy. He can do amazing things.
Right.
I can't do that, and probably most of us can't. So
we're going to let Jeff go, because
yeah, I was going to say, why don't I go first, because I'm the simple guy.
I know you are, Jeff.
I'm the guy who wants to, you send me a JPEG and I'm happy. Do not embed your images in your story unless it's just to show me what you think a nice layout would be. But if you're going to do that, I still want the text in a separate text file, separate text, separate title, separate resource box, just a list of resources, separate captions, and then separate JPEGs if possible. I know there's some other things. Martin knows everything, so he's going to tell you how to take care of more complex situations. But I'm the simple guy, and I appreciate simplicity. So, Martin.
Well, I want a simple submission, but I want it right. The one thing that I will be frustrating authors over is the mechanics of the submission. In some cases, we're working with very short timelines. There was a day, Jeff and I can remember looking at a file on the server at APS and seeing a long backlog of articles. APS may still have that for the AP. They may not own the Philatelic, the library piece, but today, in some cases, I am working literally to the deadline to get articles in, to get them edited, and to get the layout done. So echo what Jeff said. I want it simple, but I'm pretty specific on what that means. The ideal submission for a manuscript is a PDF file that contains all of your text and the position that you think works best for the images as they flow with the narrative. Now, because of the constraints of layout, sometimes they're not even going to be on the same spread. Sorry, there is a lot of situations where it just simply won't fit. But give me a PDF file that shows all of your text, that shows each image in the flow of the text where you think it's the most logical, and a caption for that image. In the publications that I'm responsible for, every image, unless it is a background texture or just a fill, which is obviously just a fill, every image has a caption. My hope is that my authors are going to write it because they're going to know the full detail. And in some cases, I'll edit down or edit up a caption to make sure that it fits well. But give me a caption. And that PDF is kind of my first review. What I also want with that is a Word file that contains no images. I know for a lot of authors, it's convenient to put the images in the Word file and then send one Word file. Every version of Microsoft Word treats images differently. And generally speaking, by the time you've embedded those and pushed that Word file onto me, the images are worthless for print reasons. Most of my publications, I have to have 300 DPI minimum at size at which it's going to be reproduced. Things coming out of Word quite often are less than 200 DPI, regardless of what you started with. So I am looking for that PDF file. I am looking for the Word file that doesn't contain any images, but matches the text exactly. Don't send me a PDF and a Word and say, oh, in the Word, you need to make this match the PDF. I'll send it back and say, no, you need to make that match because that's part of the authoring process. And then send me those images separately. I am a stickler on the images. Minimum 300 DPI scan for covers and above, minimum 600 DPI scan for stamps. Then what I want you to do is, once you've scanned that, save it as a JPEG, and don't touch anything else. Don't apply sharpening. Don't crop to the edges. If you've got a cover, I want at least a 1/4 inch all the way around that cover of null space, meaning area that I can either take out or crop to, depending on how I'm going to lay out the piece. When you scan those pieces, put a colored background that contrasts against the image. So for example, most covers that I scan here in the office, I scan with either a dark blue or an orange background, because then I can drop that background out in the software that I'm using to prepare images, and in some cases even to do the composition of the pages. Don't sharpen it, don't put a border around it. Now, if there are important things like page curl, grain, direction of application of adhesives, things along those lines, take that image, save it as a duplicate, put the arrows in your notes in that image. That way I can get it really clean, really crisp, and give you a proof that you can then say, well, yeah, can we adjust this angle a little bit? Or, hey, that arrow actually needs to be closer to this. I know that's more work, but my job as an editor is to make a brilliant magazine that makes you look like a brilliant author. And that extra work will enable me to do that. Steve made a point. I am an Adobe workflow guy. I have been since Adobe was a little company that Apple was hoping to help become a real business someday. So I have been using the software since before Photoshop was called Photoshop. Unfortunately, I don't know a lot of the other tools that are available. One I can tell you to avoid like the plague is Microsoft Publisher. Now, others may have different opinions of that, but it produces some of the most difficult files to manipulate. But if you send Publisher to most printers, you're going to get a laugh. And in some cases, they're going to say, we really don't want your business. That sounds extreme, but I've seen it happen. So those are the things that I would say right off the bat. Technique is very important because it makes it easier to get the product in print faster.
Let me add something too, which I think is important, because style guides, which we didn't mention and don't talk about, is probably something that I know have, because I work with Michael Lawrence at the Chronicle all the time to look at where we're at, what we're doing, how we're doing it, do we have to tweak it or not? Just doing that for a couple of decades now with him and then Charlie and all. And you also get a good feel if you are an author writing, and I'm living in both spaces, but I don't put my little chatter in the same realm as what these two gentlemen are doing. I do when I talk with the Chronicle, working with Michael, and we work really hard to put out an amazing, I think, on the Chronicle side. I work with him just as much as I do my own piece for the chatter. But I think the style is important as well. If you want to understand the content of any journal, you can read that journal, and it's nice to get a feel for it. And you get a feel for the layout and the style and what they're looking for too. And if they have a published one, that would also help as well. And so you want to look, and I think you both said it, keep it simple, yes, but from an author perspective, we want to tell a good story, and we want to be presented in the best light as an author. And I want the editor to help me evolve each time I write something so that the images do look great, and that it is laid out, and that there is a flow, and that the reader is engaged from page 1 to 6, or 1 to 1, or whatever that might be, depending on what the size of it is. So those are things from my perspective as well, living on both sides, that, think about the audience, think about the journal. Where do you think it's appropriate? You have great editors out there who've been doing this, who know this space, who absolutely want to shine a light on yourself, you as an author, and the work. And how best to do that? If you take a little critical advice, at least not even criticism. Look, talking to individuals, I think, that have a lot of experience, and there's a lot of editors out there and that are here as well on this call. I think that's an interesting dialogue and a ballet that you work on with the author and the editor, right? And I presume as the author too, when you wrote that draft, you probably, as I alluded to at the beginning, had a few of your friends or colleagues read it too, so that you can bounce it off of them to look and see what they thought. Does it make sense? Does it flow? How do the images look and all that? And then if there is a spec, I'll go back to what Martin and Jeff said, keep it simple, follow the spec. If you want to JPEG, scan it. Most scanners come with pretty preloaded, simple software. You don't have to tweak and modify. The default is probably enough to just meet the DPI with the backgrounds as you just heard. And those are the files that you're going to want to send off, and you keep it simple. And I think that from an imaging perspective and format, that's pretty easy for most of us if we're writing. I know I live in both spaces. I want to write when I'm writing and drop in my images. And that's for me, just so I get a feel of the flow. But I then know wherever I'm sending it, I could simply copy and make a duplicate of my Word file if that's what I'm using. I can subtract out my images, have nice clean text, and it's very easy to send that off to Martin or Jeff or Michael, if I'm doing that to the Chronicle, and just deliver it that way. So I wanted to add that little piece too, from a style guide to the way you're writing from the author, working with the editors, because they want to refine it. And I can tell you, I know working with both Martin and Jeff only recently, they've made my articles better. And I continue to get better as an author in this space too, as I think about it and lay out, and they're seeing something that I'm not seeing. As a writer, you might be too close to it and you might not see the path. And Jeff, kudos, because you came up with the title for that particular article that made sense and it sold it. And I think the same for you, Martin, too, the way you think of how you laid it out, it just flowed better with the story we were trying to tell. And I could speak again from the AP, having just worked with them for the February research issue and working very closely with the editor, associate editor, and the designer who laid it out, right? I got that experience of doing that. It is a really great experience. And I couldn't have been more pleased with the way that it turned out. And I think for those folks that are authors now or are thinking about getting into the space, I think you've got to be open to going through this process. It is a great experience. And then you're right, there it is. Whether it's online or whether it's in that nice smell when you open the envelope. I mean, it's really a great feeling when you get to have your name up there and other folks can get to share your excitement about what you just spent a lot of time writing about and loving about. So that's my little piece in between these two excellent gentlemen who really, I think, boiled it down to what we wanted to talk about from that perspective. So Steve, I'll kick it back to you.
Okay, thanks. That's really awesome. And now I'm going to ask a question now, because it's segue from that image thing. I've been very lucky, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Vernon Morris here tonight. He has shared a lot of information and a lot of material with me. And one of the things we're always doing, we could go weeks at a time with these huge files, right? We use WeTransfer. It's simple, it's easy. I wanted to see what you guys think about, like you're talking about those, you might be in PowerPoint or whatever. They're sending these big files around, not necessarily just for publication, but maybe we want to share some of our materials or our collection with other people. Any tips or tricks about how to share that kind of stuff? Maybe compressing something, using WeTransfer, Google Drive, any kind of tips to make it easier for people?
I'll jump in. I do it every day. There are multiple options. WeTransfer.com is a website. They offer a paid service, but primarily they offer a free service. You go online, you accept their privacy terms, which are, I'm one of the people that read those. Their privacy policy is solid. Their security is very, very good. And what they enable you to do is put in your email, put in the email of the person to whom you want to send a large file, write a quick note, and upload your file. Now, you can upload more than one. They'll do the compression. They do everything. You click send. Once it uploads, depending on the speed of your internet connection, it's off to your destination. They get an email. From that email, they click and can download. The nice thing is when they download, you get an email back saying they've downloaded it. You also get an email if they don't download it. Had a situation this week, a couple of emails went to spam. One of my authors wrote and said, hey, I sent this to you. Have you seen it? That enabled me to find it. And he only knew because WeTransfer told him, hey, this hadn't been picked up yet. I use Dropbox extensively. Dropbox is a great way to share. It's good for me. I'm already paying for the service. I've got terabytes and terabytes of data out there. And when somebody calls and says, hey, I did an article last year on this, can you get it to me? I can very quickly send them a Dropbox link. It saves me time because I don't have to re-export the file, send them that as a PDF in an email, make sure they got it. I can do it directly from Dropbox. Google Drive is a good one. There are a lot of them out there. For a lot of what I do, I offer file upload on my website so that somebody says, hey, I've got these files to send you. How can I get those to you? I just send them this link. They go on there, and then I get a notification when it's uploaded. Be careful of the no-name services. There are a number out there that do not have solid security. There are a number out there whose privacy policy is garbage. So you put your email in and you have just invited every spammer on the far continents to send you email constantly, as well as the person you're trying to send to. WeTransfer is good, solid, secure, and free. Dropbox has a free option, and it allows more complex sharing. Google Drive is very similar, and there's a free level as well as a paid level. If you stick with those three, you're safe, it's easy to do, and it's highly reliable.
That's awesome. I think that's a big help for everybody. Jeff, did you have any?
No, I've used both WeTransfer and Dropbox. I haven't used Google Drive. I know Charlie has, and he's asking me to send him stuff via Google Drive, and I need to do that.
You can. I use all three, so whatever you want to use, I'll take anything you want to say.
Yeah. No, they're all good. So, yep.
Just so everybody knows too, I'll add just a little bit here. Eventually, I'd like to do some type of roundtable for like a club management type thing, like creating a newsletter, doing all the things you do. But one of the things with Google Drive, and maybe that's why Charlie uses it too, I know what I do is, as a nonprofit with the Pennsylvania Postal History Society, we got set up with Google where they offer you free services. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but if you're interested, please let me know. And you can have storage. You could have, I share stuff with Martin, like I'll have an editor folder on our Google Drive. I can just drop it in there. Our membership list could be there. And all that's free for nonprofits. You do have to get verified through a company called TechSoup. It was not a complicated process to do though. And it's worked for us for a lot of reasons. So free is always good, and that's one way you can do that. So I appreciate that service. So if you guys don't have, if you'd like to open up maybe for some questions, I'm sure we have a lot of really accomplished people on here. If anybody has some question to ask or something to add, we certainly like to do it.
Before we start that,
yeah, go ahead.
I want to get some people angry, so I thought I would mention some of what I work with some authors on and why I do it as much. And a lot of what I do, they find probably strange, different. I do have a long history with daily news writing. So the style book I use is the Associated Press. It's the most widely used style book in the country. And the reason I like it, aside from the fact I know it, is that it simplifies a lot of things. Again, I'm the simple guy. So it has kind of a direct, simple way of approaching a lot of things that can be very confusing. It doesn't really matter what publication, what style guide your publication uses, as long as it's consistent. So I know one I was looking at the other day, I forgot which one it was, uses that horrid Chicago Manual of Style. We don't like to mention them, but no, I'm just kidding. They're they've been long storied and whatever. But so they're very consistent. They use that style book. I use this style book. But with that, it doesn't always mix with philatelic experts, so to speak, very knowledgeable people who get really into the language of the hobby, get really into the language of what they know. And that doesn't always transfer well to all the other hobbyists in the same hobby, because we all have areas where we focus. We all have areas that we like, all areas that we've studied, and they don't always mix. Plus, you have to remember our hobby is not just for people with higher education degrees. You know, so for example, you went to an engineering journal or a medical journal, obviously the language and lingo is going to be a certain level. I don't think we have that quite. And people may say I'm dumbing things down, and maybe that's true. I don't want to dumb it down. I don't want to destroy the philately, but maybe some of the language. I'll just give you a few examples. Number one, acronyms. I hate acronyms because to me, you pick up an article and somebody uses a lot of acronyms, it looks like alphabet soup. So even, you know, if you go to a standard publication, news publication, or National Geographic or Smithsonian or the New York Times, your local newspaper, if they still exist, they probably don't use too many acronyms. And the reason is they don't want it looking like alphabet soup. So even the most widely used acronyms, FBI, CIA, US, USA, on first reference, they're spelled out. Then maybe the acronym is used. But other than that, you know, I'm not going to use FDC for first day cover. You know, I'm not going to use CDS for circular date stamp. You know, I'm going to spell it out. I don't even like to use it for the society that I'm writing for. So when I was at the APS, you know, I would try not to use APS very much. I mean, we did use it, but I would use it as little as possible. That's acronyms. Numbers, again, I know this is a real hot button for certain people, but you just sort of need to separate when to use a figure, a digit, and when to use a word. And I tend to use a lot of words. And also too many numbers. So I know writing about a cover that's gone through, you know, different rates and different routes and the mileage and all sorts of things. You build up a lot of numbers in your, you know, explanation of a cover. That's okay. That needs to be there, and you know, that's no problem. But maybe what you need to do is break it into shorter sentences. So it's not one long 80-word sentence with all of these numbers in there. I think that would be helpful. I mean, I would do that as an editor. I would do that as a writer. Foreign phrases, I'm not going to get too much into that. I apologize if you've said. In a long article where you have a lot to talk about, you reach a point where there's a little bit of a side rail, a side path. You're going to go off the main path and talk about this other really neat thing, maybe a neat personality or a neat thing that happened in the postal service or delivery or something. And you're going to take, you know, this, you're talking about subject A, and then suddenly you're going to go off on subject B, which is very interesting and maybe part of the story, but maybe it gets too much. So by the time you're done writing 200 words about subject B, people have forgotten where you were on subject A. So you might think about that, and I would think about that as an editor, as breaking that out is what we call a sidebar. You can call a secondary story, side story, something like that. You know, you can think about it, you can talk to the editor about it. It's just something to remember that, you know, sometimes it's good to take a chunk of your story and put it in a separate story. There's a lot of capitalization in writing, I see. That drives me nuts too. There are a lot of words that don't need to be capitalized, shouldn't really be capitalized. And I can't go into all of it here, but this includes the markings on a cover. So I have a cover, and I mentioned it was postmarked July 4th, 1891 in Syracuse, New York. And you can see the image right there of the cover in your story. And there's the big, you know, circular date stamp, Syracuse, New York. I'm not going to put Syracuse, New York in capitals, even though that's what it says on the cover. It's not important. You can see that. And again, the reason is that you start putting all those capital letters in there. It's just a total distraction to the reader. And it's like, what? Where am I now? And some covers have a lot of capital letters on them. Unless you want to distinguish very clearly, this postal marking was used in capitals, for 10 years, and then they switched it to upper lower, something like that. Okay, that's fine. We can work that out. So I'm going to stop there. There are probably lots of others, and maybe some people have some questions about them. So,
may I say something? I'm often get sort of, how can I say, shaking if I get too long, these long sentences. It seems that long sentences are so common, and with clauses, often at the beginning, a dependent clause at the beginning. Short declarative sentences are hard for people to write for some reason. And I only wish that when I was getting started on writing, and particularly philatelic writing, that some editor like Jeff or Martin had helped me with this. Too often I see articles which look like they've been put in desperation to fill the page. And they are sloppily written, and they don't seem to match other articles in the same journal. So often, and what I want to, I would be curious what you think about the idea, because you mentioned rejections, of journals that seem to always be short of issues, and therefore will just be happy to have anything as fast as possible on the page.
Well,
is that it?
I don't know if I have a lot to. First, I want to say thank you for your comments about the sentences. Shorter sentences always work. You're not going to be harmed by a shorter sentence, so it's like, why not? And that was another thing I learned from one of my very first editors. I was on the job about 2 months, and my sports editor turned to me and said, "Stage, throw some periods in there once in a while, would you?" So I was guilty of that for sure, obviously. And that was one of the first lessons I learned in the daily newspaper. Throw some periods in there. It doesn't hurt. As far as the journals, I know I can only tell you what I've heard. I'm new to the journal area other than the APS, where we were never short of articles. But I have heard that certain societies may be short on articles. I don't know.
I deal with a shortage on an ongoing basis, and if you've seen any of the things that I manage, it's not unusual to see a couple of pages taking up with an appeal for manuscripts. But I agree, shorter sentences are usually better communicators. And one of the things, and I need to start doing this more, because you made a good point. We have a responsibility to help each other learn through the process. But one of the things that I will do with an author when they don't understand or they disagree with, shortening a sentence or changing the structure, is read it out loud to someone else. Because that will go a long way toward understanding if your audience is understanding. Because a lot of times I will read something, I read every article before it's accepted, and I will sit there and I'll be reading along and fairly good clip, and all of a sudden I'll go, wait, what? If you have that reaction, or if someone you read to has that reaction, then you got a sentence structure or sentence length problem.
Or if you need oxygen because you cannot get it out in one breath. I mean,
Yes.
I know I've been, and you guys have pulled me back in, and so's others. I mean, because coming from a scientific writing background, I could write a whole paragraph of one sentence without punctuation, describing some experiment that I did, and there you go. In this case, I believe you're right, absolutely, and I'd echo what Allison said too. It's you're right. And I hear what Jeff said, use periods.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was told that a couple of times. And I think you're right, Martin. Again, I think if you've got to speak that out and you're getting to a point where you're turning a little blue because you cannot get the whole sentence out, you clearly have gone a little too far. And what Jeff just said too is going to make Martin, Jeff, thank you, edit one of my whole sentences in the article that's coming out, because there's way too many numbers, Martin, and you're going to have to chop it up and cut it out. But I think you're bringing up great points from shorter is better, right, within that space. And if you're writing 3 or 4 lines, I mean, just take your, right, if you're going beyond 3 or 4 lines in whatever the column is, right, you'll see the style, you've probably gone too far, right? You would agree that, right?
Yeah.
3 or 4 lines is just too much.
Peer review is very, very valuable. Having someone else read it. And, if you can read it to them, sometimes you'll find things that especially a non-philatelic listener will miss. And one quick point, the way to endear yourself to a lot of philatelic editors is to offer content freely and wait longer than 48 hours to ask when it's going to be published. Because I'm not kidding. I get emails on a Monday, and if I have not told them publish date by Wednesday, I get some frustrated emails. So, it doesn't matter what you're editing. Editing takes a lot of time and a lot of concentration, but if you will help fill up my backlog, I'll make sure you get published. I usually don't reject, especially first-time authors, but I don't reject if there's a chance that an author will work with me to make a piece publishable. I'm not going to reject you, but what you do need to realize is the quickest way to know how little you know about a subject is to publish an article, because everyone in the hobby will tell you.
Yeah.
Yes.
True.
Yes.
So, Rick, did you have something to add there?
Yeah.
I'd like to.
No, the only thing I think I heard Martin say was it's okay for my lips to move when I read.
Yes.
Great. Okay, and one thing I wanted to mention too, I know you guys had mentioned about the longer articles, so we are planning on doing a part 2 of this, and at that point I'd like to discuss some things where we possibly talk about maybe you should write a book, right? Maybe you should write an ebook. What are the tools that you can use to do that? I know it can be very intimidating whether you're doing a Kindle book or a PDF or an actual ebook with a cover and a table of contents, all that stuff. So hopefully we'll be able to help with that a little bit for our next one. I just wanted to throw that out there.
We've got some fresh information on that too. In the last 9 days, I've talked with 3 authors who are going to take books electronically and publish on demand. There's some great options out there. They can be hard to understand, but I've dredged through a lot of that, and that'll be a good conversation. That is a great outlet that I think a lot of people are missing. I've got two books in the floor that came in through self-publishing. They're top-notch and they're well printed.
So it's a neat, hopefully it'll be a neat opportunity for some people. I saw Stephen Roth, he's writing other books now, not really philatelic type stuff, but if you look at his website, he uses software called Book Funnel. It's pretty cool the way it's set up, to use. And I'm sure there's many others, but people that might be interested might want to check on that. So with that being said, anybody have any questions for our panelists? Anything to add? I know you're very prolific authors out there and have a lot to share.
Just a question, if I may.
Sure.
I come from a scientific background, so published in the chemical literature, and almost all of the journals there have a set of instructions for authors, which explain how the editor would like the thing submitted, what the restrictions are on tables and figures and illustrations and so on. Do any of the philatelic journals have such a document? Because I think that would be quite an instructive thing to look at.
I've prepared it for 2 of the journals that I manage, and I know Jeff and I had worked through one when we were both at the AP. So it's not uncommon to find it. The level of detail will vary. In a lot of cases, the guides that I see will say follow AP style. The problem is the AP style book is this thick.
Okay.
So, that's a bit of a challenge.
Look, Jeff is going to find it. He's going to find it.
It's right down the hall.
He
I
may
got
be
it.
picking it up.
He's going to wheel it in, but yeah,
Yes.
he's going to wheel it.
So one of the things, and Steve and I have talked about this for the Pennsylvania Historian, we're going to write a really detailed piece that covers a lot of the things we've talked about today, how to construct your article, how to scan your images, but also get into style. Here's the way to do a table. And here's the way it will look after we process it. Because generally speaking, unless you're doing the layout, then it's not going to look the same in what you're doing as what I'm doing. So we're going to give some detail, and I suspect the one we do for the historian will be one of the most detailed that's been prepared lately.
Good, good.
It's a novel idea, writing an article on how to write an article.
Yeah.
So I'll just add, I can, go ahead, Jeff, and then I'll add after you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing about style is that at this point, I try to use Associated Press style. If at this point, if one of our writers sends something and it's not AP style, I'm not going to throw it back at them. I'm going to change it because I'm the editor, and I think Martin will probably do the same thing unless it's really, really off style or something like that. That's part of the editing process. So, as long as it's in the English language, I can probably deal with it. Now, I will tell you, I ran into a strange little problem. An author had contacted me about maybe helping him work on his book. So we went back and forth, and he didn't like some of my ideas, including I suggested putting either the name of the country he was writing about or the name of the stamp he was writing about in the title of the book. I said, looking at the title of the book, I have no idea what you're writing about. So we didn't go too far, but he had gotten himself, he's an American, and he'd gotten caught up with the idea that maybe the Royal in London would publish his book. So I think he created it using their very specific style, which I found a little strange because he really was writing for sort of an American audience. But, apparently the Royal, of course, is very adamant about that. I think he ended up with a bit of a problem because of that. So I just guess if somebody's going into a great amount of work, they should really be very sure if they have a publisher that absolutely wants something a certain style, that it's maybe set in stone, or they have a contract or something. Otherwise, choose a style that's makes sense and stick to it. Just be consistent all the way through. And that's the best I can offer on just a common sense approach.
I agree.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so Paul, I'll just round it out from my perspective, working with Michael Lawrence the past decade and change, and then Charlie Peterson prior. We absolutely have a style guide for our section editors at the Chronicle. We have, and for prospective authors. We review it every year. We put it up every year. It is there. It doesn't really change much or tweak a bit, but it's a 12-pager. It is pretty detailed. It is there. And I think, from reading and looking at that journal and the amount of time that it has been published out there, it's evolved a bit, but I think the past 30 years, it's probably been pretty firm with what it looks like and where it's at and sort of how we take it on. And that kind of, I think, helps authors work with the section editors and the editor in really getting it prepared in the way that we would like to see it when it comes to us. But there is back and forth. It is what it is. You've heard it again from Martin, and you've heard it from Jeff and other editors that are here. I'm looking at a number of editors that are here. There is that back and forth. And I think you do get to know, and I know we had that on the topic for next time, getting to know the editor. I think that's really important into getting to know the journal, getting to know the editor, and creating that relationship. If there's an area that you're interested in publishing, you found a journal that meets your needs and their needs, and there's that quid pro quo, that's really good for you to continue to feed the editor, feed the journal, feed that society, and then feed yourself as an author to keep some of it back. We talked about also length, and maybe it doesn't all have to come out at once, but you can put a short piece out, and that gives you an opportunity to follow up with a second or third piece, maybe along that same train of thought. And so again, something to think about, but there are style guides out there, and I think some of them are very detailed that help you really craft it and make it ready for prime time. And then the editor takes it from there and they refine it, and we all look good at the end of the day. The society, the journal, the editor, and the author. And then you want to come back for more. I know I sure as heck am. Now that I'm hooked on this thing, I'm going to keep on writing if you guys keep on reading it. And I'm looking at Paul Peterson because I could speak specifically because he looked at my other article that I did for the February issue, and we switched around massive paragraphs to make it flow better even before it went to Gary and the team over there and Suzanne. And then it just had a better flow. The story just went better. So I go back to that piece that we talked about as well, saying it aloud, reading it to somebody else, having them read it. All of those things together really help you refine your craft and your style as a writer. And that's appealing to an editor as well. And if you get that relationship going with the editors, I hope I'll do the same with Jeff and Martin. They'll take some more of my material, and that would be great. Here we go. So I'll stop there.
I do think that today we have a higher level of quality and consistency in many of the best journals than there ever has been. And the editors have changed too. They're a lot more down to earth. They're willing to talk and help people. When I was first beginning to write, there were some editors who, quite frankly, were rather arrogant and knew better than I did how to write, but they never told me that until I saw my article rewritten in the journal. Now, nobody here was, involved in this. This was ancient history almost, because I've been writing for philatelic journals since the late 60s. So today, I think there is a better way of doing things. And people like you and Jeff, Martin, others do an excellent job, really.
I think that's for sure. And one thing I have to tell you personally, one of the things that really interests me, and I'm a member of so many different societies, mainly because of their journals.
Yes.
Everybody's publishing in color now, and it's really awesome to look at some of these journals. I'm scanning back issues of the Pennsylvania Postal, the Historian, so that we can put them on our website. And I'm starting in 1973 and seeing, the typewritten pages that were Xeroxed, right? And and now things are just really slick, and it's worth joining different societies just for their publications a lot of times. So that's something to keep in mind. People will see your stuff, and hopefully you'll captivate somebody's interest. And one other thing that I wanted to touch on really quickly was like a mentorship type of thing too, because these editors can't do everything for everybody. So I think it's really cool. There's a lot of people that may not reach out and say, hey, can you help me write this article? Can you help me? But maybe if you see some younger people or somebody struggling with something, maybe, you're very experienced, and just offer to help just a little bit. It gets them over the edge, and who knows, the next thing they might be writing 4 or 5 articles a year for you, and it can be really awesome. And,
well, we had an experience like that, Steve. I'll speak to it.
Yeah,
Jeff knows that,
David,
right? We had a new member here at the Empire State. We had a new member. He joined the Philatelic Society of Lancaster County. He had a simple favorite little cover, the 3-cent locomotive, right, from the pictorial period, and he was in New York. It went, I think, to a psychiatric center, whatever, from this little cover. Right, we were able to get David Goodhart, I'll tell you his name, right, never wrote anything ever in this space, new to the hobby, joined both. And I said, David, you can write that up. And I said again to him, just write a couple sentences describing the cover and what's on the front and the back and the stamp, and next thing you knew, right, he had a short, nice little piece that, working with Jeff, you were able to add an image and a stamp and do a little history, and then he did some more, and you had an article. I mean, it's as simple as that. So I think you're right. We've got to kind of work with, as editors and writers, work with our friends and colleagues in this space to help them. And Paul knows too, because we talk about it for our newsletter, even at the Philatelic of Lancaster County. Just take a little cover, write a short little snippet. We'll work with you, and we'll craft a beautiful little piece out of it, right? So I just wanted to share that, because I think you're right, Steve. It's probably incumbent upon us to do that. That's the joy of the hobby, right? As editors and writers, is to help our fellow collectors and write all of that, to do that. So that's a piece that I love to do. I want to I challenge everybody to do that as well. One, to help if you haven't helped someone, and two, if it challenge you to find that favorite cover or stamp and just write a little something. There is a journal that you will get it out in that will take it and everybody will see. I mean, that's just phenomenal, right? So, yeah, Jeff, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
And Facebook has been a great place too for the people that participate. I know Charlie and I are always on Facebook. He shares so much material, and that's where we find some of these people like David. He's been very good also with the Mid-Atlantic Federation. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there that you can tell they start asking some questions. And if you just send them a little private message, say, hey, I'd like to, you know, talk to you about this or that, and it really spurs them on. And we all, you know, most of our society, each of our societies are maybe building a little bit at a time, a little percent here, percent there. But overall, you know, Pennsylvania Postal History Society used to have at one point, I saw in the journals, 350 members, you know. We're happy with 125 members now, you know. So I'd love to, you know, anytime I see Pennsylvania on an article that's written or something somewhere, I shoot somebody an email, I try and call them, I try and get in touch with them. I'm like, hey, why are you not part of this? You know, we're having fun over here. So I try to encourage them to be involved with us. So anybody else, anything else to add?
Questions, comments,
Just gonna-
thoughts, please.
Greg,
Just gonna
you're muted
give
there, Greg.
an-
I don't know if you want.
just going to give an anecdote of I lived in Switzerland for a while and found an article on the bit of British postal history that I'm interested in, and I edit the magazine for, in a German magazine, German language magazine. Worked together with the author, who actually spoke brilliant English, and we translated it into English. Then I published it for him as the translation. So that can be a way of getting more material to a broader audience.
Absolutely.
That's a great idea. I know, Bruce, we've been through that. We do Switzerland too, and you have so many different languages involved. And you know, the thing for me, I'm used to the Scott catalog. Next thing I know, I'm looking at these catalogs trying to figure stuff out. It's like, oh my, how am I ever going to figure out this stuff from Switzerland, right? Everything's in different languages. So
Well, there's only 5.
Yeah. Well, I struggle with one. I'm trying to get through it. Greg, did you have something there, Greg? I saw you were trying to unmute.
I was having a good time writing for a while there. I had a long series of articles in the United States Specialist, and they had talked about doing a book, but when it came time to do the book, all of a sudden nobody wanted to talk about it. There was no editor to be found again. And it just kind of soured me because I'd put a lot of time and effort. This series of articles ran 17 journals. And I don't know, maybe some of y'all read them. They were on the national parks and the Farleys. And it would have made a nice book. But the only person that reached out was a publisher in Nebraska who said he would try and help. But nothing ever came of it.
Right.
So, yeah, I kind of got a little discouraged.
Well, I think one of the things that we touched on with the ebooks and the PDFs now might lower some of those barriers to entry. One of the other societies I'm in, the Florida Postal History Society, they produced a really awesome coffee table book. It's beautiful. I paid $100 for it because it's an awesome, awesome book. Now they have to figure, should we do a reprint? How many people are going to buy print books? Or should we sell it for less money and make it a PDF, make it downloadable? Those are questions that are out there. So that might be something you might want to talk with Martin a little bit about. That's kind of what his company does, and he may be able to help with some of that. And some of the ebook, my wife yells at me now for getting new books. I got to be honest. I'm only allowed to have PDFs now, but I really enjoy them. I have a huge monitor. As I'm getting older, it's easier. I can make the text really huge if I want to. And it's more comfortable for me to read that than to read a print book. So I hope people consider that down the road and, you know, use that outlet. And it doesn't cost a lot. The software, it doesn't have to be, you know, Martin, go ahead. Yeah, I can see you.
One of the things, and I'm not familiar, I've heard kind of side conversations about the national parks book. I don't know any details. I edit the U.S. Specialist now, but in most situations, when books are talked about, what kills them faster than anything else is economics, not interest, but just the massive difference between the cost to print versus the potential for sales. Now, with that said, the self-publishing options, the electronic publishing options are really starting to help overcome that gap, but still there is a cost issue. So let me also do a little research on my side. If that was a book project in existence with the USSS, I know who to talk to and see what happened. And the other thing to consider is in a lot of cases we're dealing with a lot of volunteers involved, and it's easy to inadvertently make a commitment that someone didn't have the ability to make, or that really had a long path before it became a commitment. So the key is there's always interest. There is always an audience for the materials that we're all producing and hopefully publishing. The key, and sometimes the more frustrating aspect, is finding the right path to get it to the audience. So don't let that be a discouragement. That's a mechanic issue. That's an economic issue. And the nice thing is today it's getting easier and easier to overcome that. So I'll do a little research on my side, and feel free to contact me directly with details that you have.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about a book. And one of the top people in the USSS reached out and said he thought it'd be a great idea and got me all excited about it. And when I finished writing the series of articles, it was like, okay, well, we're going to have you edit your own book. And I'm like, what? I've never written a book.
Wow.
Hey, Martin, we got to get Greg excited again about this stuff, right? So we'll do a little
Exactly.
homework, and
Yeah,
that goes
so-
for anybody, right?
Yeah, the thing I'll do after we finish here tonight is dig into my digital archive and take a look. I've seen the articles. It was before my time as the editor, so I'll do a little research. But that's one of my areas of specialty in collecting. So I would love to see that see the light of day.
Okay, well, yeah, it was Lynn that did a wonderful job as editor, helped me out a lot.
Oh yeah,
I learned a ton of stuff from him. And I was really glad to have him as the editor. Although there were times I think we both were ready to say the things that aren't printable on air.
that happens.
That was great. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Martin. Any other questions, though, Steve, for the group, please? You still got a good group here.
Yeah, we get plenty of time. I get, we've had some previous presentations, and it's tough to have one person, and a lot of times you limit it to an hour and whatever. I tried to leave this a little more open-ended, so please feel free if anybody has any. How about maybe can we talk just a sec about newsletters too, that kind of publishing? Because I know people get overwhelmed, myself included. I said, oh, I'm going to do this newsletter. What I ended up doing for Pennsylvania is I used the MailChimp. I basically just put a header on it, and I'm just using a Word document that I'm putting in. Then I see other things like the women exhibitors. I love their newsletter. I love it. It's awesome. And I'm here to tell you, everybody, you should take a look at that at least once. It's $5 to join their association, and they send an awesome newsletter, and it really looks nice. They have like images, they have like cartoon type things, they have regular images, they have all this stuff, and I wish I knew how to do something like that, like a newsletter. Is it something we can overcome and work on for our clubs?
Well, maybe you should reach out to them and ask them who's doing the editing for it.
Right. That's one example, But
The nice thing about newsletters is that the avenues for delivery give a little bit of freedom. One of the challenges is I know I've got either 48 pages, I got 80 pages, I got 96 pages, and I got to fill those pages up. With a newsletter, Even the ones that are delivered via paper, a lot of the times, if it's 8.5 by 11, two-sided, if it runs 13 pages this time, if it runs 21 pages next time, you've got a lot of leeway there. Delivery electronically is even more the case. And the nice thing on the electronic delivery is there are some very good tools out there, either free or very low cost, that will make your images look incredible. There is an iOS, iPad, and iPhone app called Over. It's owned now by GoDaddy, the people that do domains and web hosting, but it's an app called Over, and you can do some incredible graphic manipulations with that. And I have produced a lot of things very quickly for others' newsletters and email campaigns. MailChimp has a free level of service. They obviously have a paid level of service. There's some others out there, Constant Contact. Those are great for newsletter delivery. And like I said, start it easy, start it simple. Run, okay, here's what's going on with the club for the next 2 weeks, and here's an article that so-and-so put together, because you can get that published very quickly. And the nice thing is then editors see those things, and we get to start making those connections. When we talk about the World Wide Web, that's the web aspect, being able to see what someone has published somewhere else and then reaching out and saying, hey, let's get you a broader audience, and let's get not only you, but that club some recognition for the work that you're doing. But that's a long, in-depth topic. And maybe that's your fourth roundtable, Steve.
Yeah.
Talk about electronic publishing for newsletters and more timely material.
Yeah, I think we should do that, and I would agree, because
Yeah.
I've seen it evolve, right? The Philatelic Society, Lancaster County, and Paul Peterson's done a great job there, right? 4 pages, 6 pages, 8 pages. It serves multiple purposes, right? And it was there before the web existed, and then I came in and built the website, right? And did that for the Empire State and for the Philatelic Society of Lancaster. I was even doing the first website for the Philatelic Classics Society, 25, 30 years ago. And so we didn't have all of that. But what we've done is you've evolved the newsletter. the Lebanon County Society here in PA just did theirs. And they did, Martin. They started out simple. A couple of pages. It's an archive and a review of what the meeting was, maybe a few speakers, some events. It talked about a show that was coming up, or 2 or 3. Maybe you got somebody to write a short little, again, that first little article on their favorite cover or whatnot. And it really was just the goings on of the society, and you can keep it simple. And then it has evolved over time, right? To 6 or 8 pages. It doesn't have to be, 20, 30, 40, 60 page. Then it would be a different type of journal. But the newsletter, and we deliver it via mail for who wants it. Easy to fold up and put it in the mail. We put it out as a PDF, and it gets email blasted to just our membership. I then put it up on the website, so then it's always there as well, and folks have access to it. So you've got multiple avenues by which you can communicate with your membership far and wide. Even if they're not members, they're going to see it if there's a topic within there that interests them. Yeah. And then they can always come back to it. So there's the legacy aspect, the archival aspect, the current, what's going on now, and in the next week or 2 or 3. So I think newsletters really do serve quite a bit of a purpose for society or any club that cannot maybe do something more formal like a large journal, right? And so that's definitely a way, I think, to keep engaged. And of course, I leverage our Facebook page when I can. And now, of course, with the YouTube channel, because just like we're recording this, we record our lectures and our presentations. There's another outlet by which, if somebody's good at really giving a nice presentation, I say you can convert that to an article. Mm-hmm. If you are able to take a PowerPoint and write down on 10 or 15 slides your story of what you just presented, you could take that text and those images. There is an article in there that you can extract 2 pages or maybe even 5 or 6. And so I know I've done that a number of times, and that's something else we can maybe talk about in part 2, is there are folks that present and they're good at putting PowerPoints together. You would be really good and probably also crafting a little bit more text with your nice images, and you can create an article out of that. And so something else to think about as we're going down this path, maybe for the next session, is write a couple of avenues and topics. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the values on the newsletter side is it can also be a less threatening way for new authors to get involved. Because I have found that when someone will write for a newsletter, it feels less threatening when they get the feedback and when they see, hey, that was not as hard as I thought it was. it's quicker to make the step up to, more scholarly or longer articles.
Absolutely, Mon, I would agree, because you can do a short one page or a half a column or one column or two, whatever, and you're keeping it within your little family of folks that know you. So
Yes.
it's a little bit more closer
Over time.
because you've got your society that, okay, fine, great, good. And then I think you're right. That's the impetus to kind of take the next step to go to a journal, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I do have a technology roundtable scheduled for down the road a little bit, and it'll evolve things like that, like websites. We have several webmasters here. I do it, Charlie does it, Martin does it, and others. We have WordPress platforms that I'd be more than happy to help people with websites. I have to be very careful, and it's not one of those build it and they will come things. You have to nurture it. It's like a baby, and you have to do maintenance on it. You have to do work and things, but I'd be happy to explain how to do that with WordPress. Martin uses a different platform. If you guys want to see an awesome website and a whole experience and interrelated social media, the ATA website is amazing for that. If you guys take a look at that, I get lots of ideas off of that. Sometimes I just sit and I surf around and I'm like, oh, I need to do that thing too. How do I do that for my group? So those are some great places, and Charlie's websites are awesome too. So, with Empire and Lancaster. So those are great places to get ideas for sure. So, okay, anybody else anything to add?
Well, I will add one thing,
Okay.
and that is not related to what we have been talking about. And that is, I do hope and urge everyone here to get your inoculation against the COVID virus.
Oh, I got to vote for that. Charlie's doing that every day, all day.
There it is, all day.
That's right, all day.
I've inoculated 250,000 people since December. So we keep on cooking, my friend. We're going. We're going.
Only today was I able to get my second jab, as the British call it. And it made me feel so satisfied.
Yeah.
Good. At the same time, I mention this because, and maybe I shouldn't mention it because you all are intelligent people who know what's going on. But this is so important because the health of these people to me, is very important.
Mhm.
I don't want any of you to get that virus.
Very good.
It'll help us
Thank
get
you.
back to some live meetings too. So, and one of the things to keep,
get back to live meetings.
yeah, that would be neat. And one of the things to keep in mind, so our next one, the next part 2 of this will be April 29th. I'll of course send it out to you in email. And then we're looking down the road for the Mid-Atlantic Federation. I talked with Bob Rose, and he has offered us a table and a room to do some presentations at NOJEX in the middle of April, April 15th to 17th. So that may become our annual meeting there. Hopefully we can do it live. If not, maybe we'll do a Zoom. But I have to be honest, these Zooms have been really awesome. I've been a member of the Pennsylvania Club for, I don't know, 20 years, whatever it might be. And I have met more people in the last year than I have in the previous 19. So I appreciate everybody's time and meeting everyone. And it's been really awesome to be able to do that.
Well, yeah, I agree with the Zoom meetings being an absolute boon. I'm homebound because of injuries received in the service. I can't get out. So this was really the best thing to come along for me.
Good.
I think it'll be part of philately moving forward, regardless of COVID. I think there's no way that we can leave it behind now. I think it's going to be a part of our hobby forever now.
Well,
and it's
I know
awesome.
for our club, the Tidewater Virginia Stamp Club, we've actually gained, I think it's 12 members now.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah, they found out about it on our website and started showing up at the Zoom meetings.
That's very good. That's a great success story.
In my experience, I belong to a non-philatelic club, believe it or not, and we live in a place where the weather can be very bad in the winter, and we've decided that all our winter meetings, even after we go to live meetings, all the winter meetings are going to be in this format
Good.
because then people don't have to worry about the weather and then just come no matter what.
Good.
That's awesome.
Very
And I'm
good.
going to offer one really quick tip because Dan
Yes.
Kellett wrote to me today. One other thing that we were exploring in the Pennsylvania Club is bringing in historical societies and genealogical societies. Well, there's so I found out in Pennsylvania there are 355 of those. So sometimes if small clubs, if you like we're trying to push postal history, of course, Pennsylvania Postal History Society. I know other clubs are doing different things, but we'd be happy to do that and talk with people about postal history and share our presentations and invite people. And hopefully we'll get some members because of that too, to work in other states also, I believe. But I had no idea, 350, and I had to build an Excel spreadsheet with all that stuff. It took me a whole weekend, 2 full days, but it was it's worth it, and we've got some good feedback from that. So if you guys from other states want to try that, it's tough.
Yeah, I want to
but
thank
it's worth
everybody,
it.
and I want to thank my colleagues here, Jeff and Martin, for being on the dais and driving this thing. I defer to their expertise. I'm just here for the smiles and laughs.
You're the color commentary.
Yeah, color commentary. I appreciate Steve, you putting this together, and we I know, it was another great turnout. I know it's recorded. I know we'll have a chance to go back and listen and learn, and I'm looking forward to part 2 as well, and even more participation in Q&A. I just, again, Steve, thank you for rallying all us together, and again, also all the audience we've had.
Thank you.
And we're all accessible. You know where we are. You can get us all. We're happy to chat with everybody anytime.
You can just Google most of the people here and you'll find all kind of
Absolutely.
things. So thanks everybody very much. We really appreciate it. We are going to have Rick Leiby's here too. He's going to do a presentation for us next Thursday for the Pennsylvania Postal History Society. And since you're on this email list, you'll get the notice about that, even if you're not in our society, and April 29th for the next one for the writers. So thanks.
Write some articles. Send some articles out. Let's
Thank
go.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Writing.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
All righty.
See
Good
you
night.
next time.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.